Alright, so Ashton wants to talk about feminism.
You can't start the video that way.
I just did.
Don't do that. I don't like that.
So, we're going to talk about feminism, I guess.
Or, yeah, feminism and maybe other things as well.
What do you were saying you were post-feminist.
No. I was saying that, to me, feminism is itself post-feminist.
And I was asking you to explain what you meant.
What I mean is that the feminism arises in the patriarchal context, and it arises as a reaction to being oppressed, and so it immediately gestures beyond itself, and it has continued to have waves.
Right. So you're really saying feminism should gesture beyond itself because the female nature in a patriarchal culture has always been defined as opposed to what male nature has been constructed as. And so that kind of feminism even needs to always go beyond itself so that we can escape patriarchy together. Is that what you mean?
That's really interesting because I would say that, feminism and the female almost becomes is constructed almost more initially, and then you said when the male is the male construction as its foil, and that's what it exists against. But I don't think the male construction becomes articulate or even conscious until later. It's because it's the dominant mode in which I guess power is being exercised.
But that's what has been articulated, though, right? That's why we need feminist philosophy to articulate what hasn't been said by all the white male philosophers.
Yeah. And so it continues
But that's the opposite, though. Why are you saying that the male, or that the female is more articulated as a construct than the male?
Well, no, I'm just saying that the male isn't as... okay. Just that, the feminist reaction, or the reaction that is feminism, it relies upon its powers to articulate its situation, to gain power and communicate what's happening, I guess, the situation. And then it... Because you didn't used to hear people say white male, right? That's part of the construction of maleness, or just
so the unmarked category that was transparent to itself is now all of a
that's
sudden
exactly what I'm saying. Yes,
becoming conscious and having to be named, and so exposed as well. Yeah,
that's what's happening.
Okay, I see.
And so that's why I say feminism is post-feminism, because it keeps waving and extending itself. And now there's complexities even in what people would have called traditionally feminism.
So post-feminism so you're a post-feminist as in you want to wave goodbye to patriarchy?
Well, I wouldn't call myself a post-feminist.
Oh.
I'm just saying that feminism, I think, I guess, ideally, is always post-feminist in its aspirations. And so I guess in a sense, I am gesturing beyond patriarchy. Mm-hmm. Definitely. But what is that?
To gesture what is after patriarchy?
Yeah.
Well, what was before patriarchy? I mean,
I don't know.
If we're going to understand it, we need to kind of bookend it, understand its origins, and in order to understand its destiny. I mean, some would say, there are plenty of examples among mammals of the same sort of male-dominated social structure. There are some counterexamples, but they're clearly the exception.
Do you think so? Do you think there are less matriarchal arrangements among mammals than other?
I think so. I mean, there are some striking examples of different forms of social organization that aren't male-dominated, but I think most are.
Well, I haven't done the research to be able to confirm that. But
someone can contradict me if they think they know.
That at least, with what we've had to survey and the the time that human beings have been doing that kind of science, that this is the phenomena that's appearing. But
well, there does seem to be evidence, prehistorical evidence, which is not historical evidence, but maybe that's just a patriarchal construct to even differentiate between historical and prehistorical peoples. But
Barfield, I think.
Well, but let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
That there's evidence of matriarchal, or sometimes matrical, to get rid of the archy or the sense of like matrical, yeah. Like ancient Crete, and even before them, just hunter-gatherers having a more egalitarian sort of women-led societies, in the sense that the mystery of birth was just revered. It was the first religion was a goddess worshipping religion, it seems, in the sense that people, the process of birth and women's special relationship to that process and to the moon and to the seasons seems to be like the origins of humanity. But then something like what brought the patriarchal separation into play? Like, where did that come from?
Well, I guess I imagine that some, I'm not saying that this is the case, but I think some have made a connection between that and the development of a certain kind of individualized form of consciousness that experiences an other.
So the process of individuation, of just distinction of the human from nature, had to be patriarchal?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that
it was.
There are some who make that connection.
Right. So, I mean, Jung and one of his students, Erich Neumann, wrote this book, The History and Evolution of Consciousness. I think that's what it's called. And it's about this Jungian... No, one of Jung's students, Erich Neumann, who basically...
And Jung wrote it. Okay.
Well, he's a Jungian analyst and psychologist. So he's saying the emergence of the ego out of the unconscious in the history of the human species, he's saying it did have to be patriarchal.
Oh, well, kind of reminds me of Rick Tarnas's Two Suitors parables, because it is sort of...
Yeah, well, another Jungian...
Yeah, but then I guess the kind of reconciliation isn't necessarily pictured as a mother, or it's like a significant other.
Sure. And I think I would take these thinkers very seriously. But I think there's more contingency in it than maybe they often accept. It could have been otherwise. It didn't need to be patriarchal.
Yeah,
there didn't need to be that social matrix for the individual ego. There could have been a different kind of ego that individuated in a matrical culture or society.
That's, I think, something that is emphasized by people like Catherine Keller and Donna Haraway. We got to tell different stories.
Yeah, Keller, in her book From a Broken Web, she makes this distinction between the soluble self and the separative self, and that's beautiful. The female-male dyad in the context of patriarchy.
Yes, that's
the women play the role of the soluble self, and men play the role of the separative self. And Odysseus wanders while Penelope waits. That's that's the founding myth of that kind of social form.
Well, and then even before that, the Tiamat, the matricide of the primordial mother.
Yep. So we can't just restore the primordial mother to rulership of civilization, though, right? Because, there's also evidence that there was some of these matriarchal cultures seem to have practiced like human sacrifice, and there's some evidence of this. And so there were some things that maybe...
Well, it was a totally different form of consciousness.
Yes. But what I'm saying is, like Barfield distinguishes between original and final participation.
Yes.
We need to have some more integrated mode of consciousness after patriarchy that's not simply a return
Yeah, of an integration of that kind of chthonic, I guess, the reunion with the depths.
So we can't undo the individuation which has occurred.
Yeah.
We can't undo history, patriarchal history. We have to heal from it. So it's like, how do we not pretend to just bootstrap ourselves out of that inheritance, but instead work with it to move beyond it?
God, I just had this kind of welling of, I guess, I don't know how to describe it, some kind of emotion, because I feel like that's working itself out right now in a way, you know, we're at the beginning of that, because there are all these groups that are kind of being forced to an increased level of, or like scope of consciousness of the past, and the relations between lineages of peoples that have been violent to each other, and even gender relations is an example of this as well. And so it's kind of like the undifferentiated mass differentiated and then became aware of itself at different nodes, and then aware of the interbeing, and the history of the interbeing in a more intense way,
right?
And the desire to rectify and become whole.
Yeah, interbeing is the perfect concept for this, like Thich Nhat Hanh's concept, right? I think he was the originator of this concept. I mean, drawing on Buddhist tradition of dependent
co-arising. That's the first time I encountered it.
So so that's perfect to understand, I think, your point earlier about feminism. Men and women have to heal this together.
Yeah.
And so if feminism is just reaction against the male, which then spurs a, male power movement, or what do they call it?
Yes.
What's the phrase?
What was that called?
Male empowerment or something.
I can't remember.
Whatever. There's a whole men's movement now.
Yeah, the men's movement. Yeah, or something like that. Men's rights.
Men's rights. Yes. And it's like, but it's laughable, but it's obviously the response to the reaction. If you're going to be against men, then you're going to cause some men to react against women, and it's like,
well, it's just like,
clearly that's not helping us heal.
Yeah, exactly, because we're not separate.
I'm not saying that women are to blame for the male rights people.
No, but we need to break through to this realization that we're all whole, like we're one whole, and there's like these polarities that we participate in and are even constituted by physically. And polarity is not like a rigid gender essentialism. It's much more complex and living and evolving. But it's still a polarity. You can see a polarity in plant morphology and like any natural process.
Yep.
It's in the cosmos is polar.
Which is not to say, though, that part of what might be happening to the human species at this moment in evolution is a dramatic diversification of different gender roles and different sexualities.
It's kind of pointing to the interior, right?
Once you get beyond the binary,
external,
right?
And people, all these new categories are arising to articulate a kind of lived experience that until then maybe wasn't. They also produce identities as well and new experiences. So I think one way to kind of, just descriptively look at the morphology of what's happening now is to just consider that as especially an emphasis on turning towards the inner life and like the kind of intangible, unquantifiable, qualitative, experience.
Yeah.
Rather than like what you can quantify and define externally, like the body.
This is like what James Hillman adds to the Jungian tradition, I think. More pluralism.
Yeah.
More of a sense of the plurality of the psyche.
Yeah.
And all these different identities within each of us that intersect, and the intersectionalists have that down, I guess, but it's even deeper than that in the sense that
I think intersectionality is often too horizontal. It's like, don't forget the other dimensions.
right, the vertical dimension that we've talked about before.
And just how we like participate in the flesh, shared flesh.
Yes.
The interbeing.